The autumn morning arrived with a gentle mist covering the grounds of Windsor Castle. Kate Middleton stood by the tall window in her private sitting room, watching the golden leaves fall slowly to the earth below. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the morning tea, steam rising from the delicate china cup that had belonged to the Queen Mother herself. The phone call had come just after dawn. William's voice had been steady, but she could hear the pain hidden beneath his calm. Words. His beloved grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had passed peacefully in her sleep at Balmoral Castle. The woman who had been the cornerstone of the British monarchy for over 70 years was gone, leaving behind a legacy that would echo through history. Kate set down her teacup and walked toward the ornate mirror that hung near the fireplace. Her reflection showed a woman who had grown from a shy university student into a confident duchess, but today she looked vulnerable and uncertain. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She remembered the first time she had met the Queen years before her wedding to William. The elderly monarch had been intimidating yet kind, asking about Kate's family and her studies with genuine interest. Over the years, their relationship had blossomed into something deeper than duty. The Queen had become a mentor, a grandmother, figure who offered quiet wisdom during difficult times. The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted her thoughts. William appeared in the doorway, his face pale but composed. He had driven through the night from Balmoral, where he had been with his family during the Queen's final hours. His eyes met Kate's across the room, and in that moment, no words were needed. She crossed to him, and they embraced in silence, sharing the weight of their grief. "The children," William whispered against her hair. "How do we tell them?" Kate pulled back to look at her husband's face. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were still young, but they had loved their great-grandmother dearly. The Queen had always made special time for them during family gatherings, teaching George about royal duties while playing games with Charlotte and Louis that filled the palace with laughter. "We tell them together," Kate replied softly. "We tell them that great-grandmother lived a full life and that she loved them very much." They found the children in the nursery, where George was helping his younger siblings with their morning routine. At 9 years old, he had already begun to understand the weight of his future role, but today he was simply a big brother, making sure Charlotte's hair ribbon was straight and Louis had found his favorite toy. William knelt down to their level, his voice gentle but clear as he explained what had happened. George's eyes filled with tears, but he stood straighter, as if already feeling the responsibility that would one day be his. Charlotte wrapped her small arms around her father's neck, while Louis, at 4 years old, didn't fully understand, but sensed the sadness in the room. "Will we see her again?" Charlotte asked, her voice small and hopeful. Kate knelt beside William, her hand reaching out to touch their daughter's cheek. "Great-grandmother will always be with us in our hearts and memories, and we'll honor her by being kind and strong, just like she taught us to be." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls and formal announcements. The Prime Minister arrived for a private meeting with William, discussing the arrangements for the transition of power and the state funeral that would follow. Kate found herself thrust into a supporting role that felt both familiar and overwhelming. She thought about all the times the Queen had prepared her for moments like this. During quiet conversations over afternoon tea, the monarch had shared stories about her own early days as queen, the challenges she had faced, and the strength she had found in her family. "The crown is heavy," the Queen had once said, "but it becomes lighter when you remember that you don't carry it alone." As the day wore on, Kate began to see the truth in those words. Staff members approached her with questions and concerns, looking to her for guidance and comfort. The palace buzzed with activity as preparations began for the formal mourning period, but through it all, Kate felt the Queen's presence, as if her spirit was helping to guide them through these first difficult hours. In the afternoon, she and William drove to Buckingham Palace, where crowds had already begun to gather. People brought flowers, cards, and photographs, creating an impromptu memorial that stretched along the palace gates. Kate watched from the car window as strangers comforted each other, sharing memories of a queen who had been a constant presence in their lives. "Look at them," she said to William, her voice filled with wonder. "She touched so many lives." William nodded, his jaw set with determination. "And now we have to carry on her work. We have to be worthy of the trust she placed in us." That evening, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra hugs and gentle words, Kate and William sat together in their private sitting room. The formal announcements had been made, the machinery of state had begun to turn, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities. Kate reached for William's hand, intertwining their fingers as they had done countless times over the years. They had faced many challenges together: public scrutiny, family difficulties, and the constant pressure of royal life. But this felt different. This was the moment when they truly stepped forward as the future of the monarchy. "She would be proud of how you handled today," Kate said quietly. William squeezed her hand. "We handled it, together, as she always said we should." Outside their window, the lights of London twinkled in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll. The Queen was gone, but her legacy lived on in the couple who would one day take her place on the throne. In their love for each other, their dedication to their children, and their commitment to serving their country, Elizabeth II's influence would continue to shape the future of the British royal family. As they prepared for bed, Kate felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, public appearances, and the beginning of a journey toward their own reign. But tonight, they were simply a husband and wife, united in their grief and their love, ready to face whatever came next together. The morning of the second day brought with it a steady drizzle that seemed to match the somber mood settling over the entire nation. Kate woke before dawn, finding William already dressed and standing by the window, watching the early light struggle through the gray clouds. The weight of their new reality had settled in during the night, and both knew that today would test them in ways they had never experienced before. Their first official appearance as the Prince and Princess of Wales would be at Westminster Hall, where the Queen's coffin would lie in state. Kate had spent hours the previous evening with her personal dressers, carefully selecting an outfit that would show proper respect while conveying strength and dignity. The black coat dress she chose had belonged to her for years, but today it felt like armor against the intense scrutiny that awaited them. Before leaving for London, they gathered their children for breakfast. The palace kitchen had prepared the children's favorite morning meal, hoping to bring some normalcy to a day that would be anything but normal. George sat quietly, picking at his food, while Charlotte asked endless questions about what would happen to great-grandmother now. Louis, too young to fully grasp the situation, seemed more interested in the unusual number of people bustling around the palace than in the sadness surrounding him. "Mummy," Charlotte said, looking up from her barely touched porridge, "will you and Papa have to wear crowns now?" Kate and William exchanged glances across the breakfast table. The question was innocent, but it highlighted the massive changes that lay ahead for their family. Kate knelt beside her daughter's chair, smoothing Charlotte's hair with gentle fingers. "Not yet, sweetheart," Kate explained carefully. "Grandpa Charles will be the king now, and we'll help him just like great-grandmother taught us to do." The drive to Westminster Hall was unlike anything Kate had experienced before. Streets that were usually bustling with normal London traffic had been cleared, replaced by thousands of people standing quietly along the route. Many held photographs of the Queen, others carried flowers, and some simply stood with their hands over their hearts as the royal motorcade passed by. Kate felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of emotion from the crowds. These weren't just subjects paying respects to their monarch. These were people mourning the loss of a beloved grandmother figure who had been a constant presence throughout their lives. She saw elderly women wiping away tears, young mothers holding their children high to catch a glimpse of the procession, and war veterans standing at attention in their medals and berets. "They loved her so much," Kate whispered to William, her voice barely audible over the sound of the car's engine. "And they're looking to us now," William replied, his voice steady but filled with the weight of responsibility. "We can't let them down." Westminster Hall, with its ancient stone walls and soaring ceiling, had been transformed into a place of solemn beauty. The Queen's coffin, draped in the royal standard and topped with the imperial state crown, sat on a raised platform, surrounded by candles that cast dancing shadows on the medieval walls. The sight took Kate's breath away. This was history unfolding before her eyes. As they took their positions for the formal ceremony, Kate felt the eyes of the world upon them. Television cameras captured every moment, every expression, every gesture. She had been in the public eye for over a decade, but this felt different. This wasn't just about her anymore. She was representing the future of an institution that had existed for over 1,000 years. The Archbishop of Canterbury's words echoed through the vast hall as he spoke about service, duty, and the continuation of the monarchy's sacred role. Kate found herself thinking about all the conversations she had shared with the Queen about this very moment. The elderly monarch had often spoken about the importance of carrying on, of finding strength in tradition while adapting to modern acts. After the ceremony, Kate and William remained in the hall for a private moment of reflection. The formal guests had departed, leaving them alone with the Queen's coffin and the flickering candles. Kate approached slowly, her heels echoing on the stone floor, and placed her hand gently on the wooden rail that surrounded the platform. "Thank you," she whispered, her words meant for the Queen's spirit. "Thank you for everything you taught me." William joined her, placing his arm around her shoulders as they stood together in silence. The weight of the crown above them seemed to symbolize everything they would inherit: the privileges, the responsibilities, and the sacrifices that would be required of them and their children. The afternoon brought a series of meetings with government officials, foreign dignitaries, and representatives from the Commonwealth nations. Kate found herself thrust into conversations about state functions, diplomatic protocols, and ceremonial duties that would soon become a regular part of their lives. Each discussion reinforced the reality that their roles had fundamentally changed overnight. During a brief break between meetings, Kate escaped to a small garden courtyard behind Westminster Hall. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. She sat on a stone bench, pulling her phone from her purse to check on the children who were spending the day with their nannies and private tutors. Her mother, Carol Middleton, had sent a text message filled with love and encouragement. Her parents had always been her anchor, providing stability and normalcy throughout her transformation from a middle-class girl to a future queen. Their support meant everything to her, especially on a day when she felt so overwhelmed by the magnitude of her future role. "Kate!" William's voice interrupted her thoughts. He had found her in the garden, looking as emotionally drained as she felt. "The Prime Minister is ready for our final meeting of the day." She stood, straightening her coat and checking her appearance in the reflection of a nearby window. The woman looking back at her appeared composed and regal, but inside, Kate still felt like the university student who had fallen in love with a prince all those years ago. The meeting with the Prime Minister focused on the transition period and the role that Kate and William would play in maintaining stability during the mourning period and beyond. The conversation was serious and detailed, covering everything from their public schedule over the coming weeks to their eventual move to more prominent royal residences. As evening approached, they returned to their home to find their children, waiting eagerly for their return. George had spent the day reading about his great-grandmother's life, determined to understand more about the woman they were all mourning. Charlotte had drawn pictures of the Queen surrounded by horses and dogs, remembering her great-grandmother's love of animals. Louis had built a castle out of blocks, proclaiming it was where great-grandmother lived now. Over dinner, Kate and William tried to maintain a sense of normalcy while preparing their children for the changes that lay ahead. The state funeral was still days away, followed by a period of official mourning that would reshape their family's routine. The children would need to attend formal ceremonies, meet world leaders, and begin to understand their roles in the royal succession. "Will we still live here?" George asked, his young mind already processing the practical implications of their changing status. "For now," William answered honestly, "but someday we may need to move to help Grandpa Charles with his work as king." That night, after the children were asleep, Kate and William sat together in their sitting room, reviewing the day's events and preparing for the challenges ahead. The formal mourning period would test their strength, their unity, and their ability to comfort a grieving nation while dealing with their own loss. Kate curled up beside William on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched news coverage of the day's events. Seeing themselves on television felt surreal. These formal, composed figures looked like strangers, yet Kate knew that this public face would become an increasingly important part of their identity. "Are we ready for this?" she asked quietly. William's arm tightened around her. "We'll never be completely ready. But we have each other, we have our children, and we have her example to guide us. That has to be enough." The third day dawned crisp and clear, bringing with it the first signs that autumn was giving way to the deeper cold of winter. Kate stood in her dressing room, surrounded by her closest advisors and stylists, as they prepared for what would be one of the most emotionally challenging days since the Queen's passing. Today, they would visit the communities where the Queen had spent her final years, meeting with the people who had known her not as a monarch, but as a neighbor and friend. The journey to Scotland felt different this time. Unlike their previous trips to Balmoral for summer holidays filled with laughter and family traditions, this voyage carried the weight of farewell. Kate watched the countryside pass by through the car window, remembering all the times the Queen had described these rolling hills and ancient forests with such love and affection. William sat beside her, reviewing notes from their private secretary about the people they would meet today. Local residents, estate workers, and community leaders who had interacted with the Queen during her summers in Scotland were gathering to share their memories and receive comfort from the royal family. For many of these people, the Queen hadn't been a distant figurehead, but a real person who remembered their names, asked about their families, and genuinely cared about their lives. Their first stop was the village church where the Queen had worshipped during her stays at Balmoral. The small stone building, with its simple wooden pews and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the altar, felt worlds away from the grand cathedrals where state ceremonies were held. Here, the Queen had been just another member of the congregation, albeit one who attracted curious glances from tourists and respectful nods from locals. Reverend MacLeod, the elderly minister who had served this parish for over 30 years, greeted them at the church door. His weathered hands shook slightly as he welcomed them, and Kate could see the genuine grief in his eyes as he spoke about the Queen's regular attendance at Sunday services. "She always sat in the third pew from the front," he explained, his Scottish accent thick with emotion. "Never made a fuss, never wanted special treatment. Just came to worship like everyone else. After service, she'd always take time to speak with anyone who wanted to chat. She remembered everyone's names, asked about their grandchildren, their farms, their troubles." Kate and William walked slowly through the church, stopping to speak with community members who had gathered to share their memories. An elderly woman named Agnes Macbeth had brought a photograph of the Queen petting her border collie during a chance encounter on a country walk. The picture showed the monarch laughing, completely at ease, with muddy boots and windswept hair. That made her look like any other countryside grandmother. She stopped to chat for 20 minutes, Agnes recalled, her eyes bright with the memory. Asked all about Bonnie here, wanted to know about her training and her puppies. When I mentioned my arthritis was troubling me, she recommended a cream that had helped her own joint pain, just like any neighbor would do. These stories painted a picture of the Queen that the public rarely saw. Not the formal monarch in elaborate gowns and tiaras, but a woman who found joy in simple pleasures and genuine human connections. Kate felt a deep appreciation for this side of her late mother-in-law, understanding now why the Queen had treasured her time in Scotland so much. Their next visit took them to the local primary school, where the Queen had made annual visits to meet with children and teachers. The headmistress, Mrs. Robertson, had decorated the entrance hall with drawings and letters that children had created over the years during the Queen's visits. Kate paused before each colorful picture, touched by the innocent way the children had captured their memories of meeting her. One drawing showed the Queen surrounded by dogs and horses, with a bright yellow crown that looked more like a sun than royal headwear. Another depicted her shaking hands with a small child, both figures smiling enormously. The letters were filled with questions about palace life, expressions of love, and promises to be good citizens of the Commonwealth. She always remembered. Their names? Mrs. Robertson explained as they walked through the classroom. Even children she had met years before? She'd ask about their progress in school, their favorite subjects, their dreams for the future. The children absolutely adored her. Kate knelt down to speak with some of the current students who had gathered to meet their future queen. 7-year-old Isla McConnell shyly presented Kate with a new drawing she had made that morning, showing Kate and William holding hands under a rainbow, with the Queen's spirit watching over them from a cloud above. She's still taking care of you, Isla said solemnly, her small voice filled with the wisdom that children sometimes possess. My gran says that's what good grandmothers do. The simple truth of the child's words brought tears to Kate's eyes. She carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into her purse, promising Isla that she would treasure it always. William knelt beside them, his own voice thick with emotion as he thanked the children for their kindness and their love for his grandmother. The afternoon brought a visit to the local estate where many of the Queen's Scottish staff lived and worked. These were the people who had maintained the grounds, prepared meals, and ensured that Balmoral remained the peaceful retreat the Queen cherished. Many of them had worked for the royal family for decades, becoming trusted friends rather than mere employees. David Campbell, the head groundskeeper, had worked at Balmoral for 42 years, starting as a young man fresh out of school and gradually becoming one of the Queen's most trusted advisors on all matters relating to the estate. His eyes filled with tears as he described their final conversation, just days before the Queen's death. She was worried about the winter preparations, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Wanted to make sure the gardens would be properly protected, that the heating systems were checked, that everything would be ready for the family's Christmas visit. Even at the end, she was thinking about others, making sure everything would continue as it should. Kate listened to these stories with growing amazement at the Queen's attention to detail and her care for everyone around her. These weren't the grand gestures that made headlines, but the small acts of consideration that revealed the true character of the woman behind the crown. As the day progressed, Kate began to understand something fundamental about the role she would one day inherit. The monarchy wasn't just about ceremony and tradition, though those elements were important. It was about being a constant presence in people's lives, a source of stability and continuity that connected ordinary citizens to something larger than themselves. During their final stop at a local community center, Kate and William met with representatives from various charitable organizations that the Queen had supported throughout her long reign. These weren't the high-profile patronages that attracted media attention. but smaller, local groups that worked quietly to improve life in rural Scottish communities. Margaret Stewart, who ran a program providing support for elderly residents. Living Alone spoke about the Queen's annual donations and her genuine interest in the program's work. She always asked for detailed reports, Margaret explained. Wanted to know how many people we'd helped, what challenges we were facing, how we could improve our services. She read every word and often suggested ideas or connections that might help us. The evening concluded with a simple dinner at a local inn where Kate and William were joined by community leaders and longtime residents who had known the Queen personally. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and tears as people shared their favorite memories of a woman who had touched their lives in countless ways. As they prepared to return to their accommodation for the night, Kate felt a profound shift in her understanding of her future role. The Queen's legacy wasn't just about the grand historical moments or the constitutional duties she had performed. It was about the thousands of small interactions, the genuine interest in people's lives, and the consistent presence she had provided for over 70 years. She showed us what it really means to serve, Kate said to William as they walked through the quiet village streets. It's not about the ceremonies or the palaces. It's about being there for people, consistently and genuinely, year after year. William nodded, his arm around his wife's shoulders as they looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the clear Scottish sky. And now we have to find our own way to continue that service, to be worthy of the trust she placed in us and the love these people showed her. That night, lying in bed in the small country inn, Kate reflected on the day's conversations and encounters. She thought about Agnes Macbeth and her border collie, about little Isla's drawing, about David Campbell's 42 years of loyal service, and about all the other people whose lives had been enriched by their connection to the Queen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more formal ceremonies, and continued preparation for the state funeral that would mark the end of an era. But tonight, Kate felt a deeper connection to the woman the Queen had been beyond her public role, a grandmother, a neighbor, a friend who had found joy in simple human connections and had used her position to make life a little better for everyone she encountered. The morning of the state funeral arrived with an unusual stillness that seemed to blanket all of London. Kate woke before dawn, her mind immediately filled with the weight of the day ahead. This would be the final farewell to Queen Elizabeth II, witnessed by millions around the world and attended by heads of state, dignitaries, and ordinary citizens who had loved their monarch for decades. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Kate could hear William moving about, preparing for what would undoubtedly be one of the most emotionally challenging days of their lives. The children were still sleeping, and Kate was grateful for these precious moments of peace before the world's attention would focus on their family once again. She had chosen her outfit for the funeral days earlier, working closely with her dresser to ensure every detail was perfect. The black coat dress was elegant yet understated, paired with a hat that would allow her to show proper respect while maintaining the dignity befitting her position. The pearls she would wear had belonged to the Queen, a final connection to the woman who had guided her through her transformation from commoner to royal. As Kate prepared herself in the mirror, she thought about all the times the Queen had shared, advice about public appearances and the importance of projecting strength even in moments of personal grief. The people need to see that the monarchy continues, the Queen had once told her during a quiet conversation over tea. They need to know that despite our sadness, we will carry on. The children appeared at their bedroom door, already dressed, in their formal black clothing. George looked serious and mature beyond his years, while Charlotte clung to her favorite stuffed animal, which the nannies had allowed her to keep close for comfort. Louis, still too young to fully understand the solemnity of the day, seemed more interested in his polished shoes than in the emotional weight of the occasion. Over breakfast, Kate and William tried to maintain a sense of normalcy while preparing. their children for what would be an overwhelming experience. The funeral service would be attended by over 2,000 people, including world leaders, members of European royal families, and representatives from every Commonwealth nation. The children would need to sit still for an extended period, maintain their composure despite the emotional atmosphere, and understand that millions of people would be watching their every move. "Remember what we talked about," William said gently to his children. "Today is about saying goodbye to great-grandmother and showing the world how much we loved her. We'll be sad, and that's okay. But we'll also be proud of the amazing life she lived." Charlotte raised her small hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will great-grandmother know that we're there?" Kate knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes, her heart breaking a little at the innocence of the question. "I believe she will, sweetheart. I think she'll know that we're all there together, remembering all the wonderful times we shared with her." The journey to Westminster Abbey was unlike anything Kate had experienced before. The streets of London, normally bustling with traffic and pedestrians, had been transformed into a processional route lined with thousands of people who had waited hours for a glimpse of the funeral procession. Many held photographs of the Queen, others carried flowers, and some simply stood in respectful silence as the royal family passed by. Kate sat in the car with Charlotte and Louis, while William rode with George in the vehicle behind them. Through the bulletproof windows, she could see the faces of the mourners, elderly people who had lived their entire lives under the Queen's reign, middle-aged adults who had grown up seeing her as a constant presence, and young children who were experiencing this historic moment without fully understanding its significance. The sight of Westminster Abbey, with its Gothic towers reaching toward the cloudy sky, took Kate's breath away. The ancient building had witnessed centuries of royal ceremonies, coronations, weddings, and funerals that had shaped British history. Today, it would host the final farewell to a monarch whose reign had spanned more than 7 decades. Inside, the Abbey. Kate was overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the gathering. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and queens filled the historic pews, while representatives from every walk of life, military leaders, charity workers, religious figures, and ordinary citizens who had been honored for their service, created a tapestry of the Queen's long reign and diverse interests. The Queen's coffin, draped in the royal standard and topped with the imperial state crown, occupied the center of the Abbey. Surrounded by candles and elaborate floral arrangements, it served as the focal point for a ceremony that would be both deeply personal and profoundly public. As the service began, Kate found herself thinking about all the conversations she had shared with the Queen over the years. The elderly monarch had often spoken about her faith, her sense of duty, and her hope that her family would continue to serve the British people with dedication and humility. Sitting in this sacred space, surrounded by the music and prayers that the Queen had loved, Kate felt the full weight of the legacy she would one day inherit. The Archbishop of Canterbury's words echoed through the vast space as he spoke about the Queen's unwavering faith, her dedication to service, and her role as a source of stability during times of change and uncertainty. Kate listened intently, finding comfort in the familiar prayers and hymns that had been part of the Queen's spiritual life. During the moments of silence, Kate became acutely aware of the breathing and shifting of the massive congregation around them. 2,000 people, representing billions more around the world, were united in this moment of farewell. The silence felt sacred, filled with collective grief and gratitude for a life well lived. Charlotte leaned against her mother's side during the longer readings, and Kate gently stroked her daughter's hair, providing comfort while maintaining the composure expected of her position. She noticed that George sat perfectly still, his young face serious as he absorbed the gravity of the moment. Even Louis seemed to understand that this was a special occasion, remaining quiet despite his usual energetic nature. When the final hymn began, Kate felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer" had been one of the Queen's favorite hymns, and hearing it sung by the Abbey choir and congregation created a moment of transcendent beauty that seemed to capture the essence of the Queen's spiritual life. Procession from Westminster Abbey to Windsor Castle for the private burial service felt like a journey through time. The route took them past landmarks that had been significant in the Queen's life: Buckingham Palace, where she had lived and worked for decades, the Mall, where millions had gathered for her Jubilee celebrations, and the countryside that she had loved so much. Kate watched from the car window as ordinary people lined the streets, many throwing flowers onto the road as the funeral procession passed. These spontaneous gestures of love and respect created a carpet of color that seemed to celebrate the Queen's life, even as they mourned her death. At Windsor Castle, the private burial service was limited to close family members and a small number of personal staff who had served the Queen throughout her long reign. The intimate setting of St. George's Chapel, where Kate and William had attended family christenings, weddings, and other personal ceremonies, provided a stark contrast to the grand public farewell at Westminster Abbey. Here, surrounded only by family, Kate felt the personal dimension of their loss more acutely. This wasn't just the death of a monarch, but the loss of a beloved grandmother, mother-in-law, and family matriarch who had provided guidance, stability, and unconditional love for generations. The final moments, as the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, were almost too emotional to bear. Kate held William's hand tightly, drawing strength from their shared love and commitment to carrying on the Queen's legacy. She thought about their children, who would grow up without their great-grandmother's wisdom and guidance, and felt the enormous responsibility of helping to fill that void. As they left the chapel, Kate noticed how the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, creating patterns of colored light that danced across the stone floors. It seemed fitting that the Queen's final ceremony should be blessed with such beauty, a reminder of the light and hope that she had brought to so many lives. The drive back to their residence was quiet, with all three children exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Charlotte had fallen asleep against Kate's shoulder, while Louis dozed in his car seat. George stared out the window, processing the magnitude of what they had just experienced. That evening, after the children had been put to bed with extra stories and gentle reassurances, Kate and William sat together in their sitting room, finally able to let down their guard and process their own emotions. The formal mourning period was ending, but their personal grief would continue for months and years to come. She would have been proud of how the children behaved today, William said quietly, his voice filled with both sadness and admiration. Kate nodded, thinking about the strength and dignity their children had shown despite their young ages. They'll remember this day for the rest of their lives. I hope they'll understand how special it was to be part of saying goodbye to someone so remarkable. As they prepared for bed, Kate reflected on the day's events and the profound change it represented for their family and their nation. The Queen's funeral had been a masterpiece of ceremony and tradition, but more than that, it had been a genuine expression of love and gratitude from a people who had been blessed to have such a remarkable monarch for over 70 years. In the weeks following the funeral, a strange quietness settled over royal life that Kate had never experienced before. The period of official mourning had ended, but the absence of the Queen's steady presence created a void that seemed to echo through every palace corridor and family gathering. Kate found herself reaching for her phone to call the Queen about small matters, only to remember with a fresh pang of loss that those conversations would never happen again. The transition period brought unexpected challenges that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. King Charles, still adjusting to his new role while grieving his mother's death, leaned heavily on William and Kate for support, with the countless decisions that came with running the monarchy. Every day brought meetings about constitutional matters, charitable patronages, and ceremonial duties that needed to be redistributed among the working royals. Kate discovered that her role had fundamentally changed overnight, though the full implications were only becoming clear now. She was no longer simply the Duchess of Cambridge supporting her husband's royal duties. She was the Princess of Wales, carrying a title that came with its own weight of history and expectation. The name alone connected her to Princess Diana, whose memory still influenced public perception of the royal family decades after her death. The children were struggling with the adjustment in their own ways. George, as the future heir, seemed to feel the weight of responsibility more acutely than his younger siblings. Kate often found him reading books about British history or studying maps of the Commonwealth countries, as if preparing himself for a role that was still decades away. His questions had become more serious, more focused on duty and obligation, rather than the carefree curiosity of childhood. Charlotte had begun having nightmares about losing other family members, clinging to Kate at bedtime and asking repeatedly for reassurance that Mummy and Papa would always be there. The little girl who had once been fearless and adventurous now seemed fragile and uncertain, needing extra comfort and attention that Kate was determined to provide despite her increasingly demanding schedule. Louis, perhaps because of his young age, seemed to be adapting better than his siblings. He continued his routine of play and learning, though Kate noticed he often asked about Gone and when they would see her again. His innocent questions were heartbreaking, requiring gentle explanations that a 4-year-old mind could understand. The first major public engagement after the mourning period was a visit to a children's hospital in Manchester, an assignment that felt both familiar and completely different. Kate had visited similar facilities dozens of times as the Duchess of Cambridge, but now she was acutely aware that every word she spoke, every gesture she made, would be analyzed through the lens of her new position as the future queen. The hospital. Staff and young patients welcomed her with the same warmth she had always experienced, but Kate could sense an additional layer of respect and expectation that hadn't been there before. When she sat beside 6-year-old Emma, who was recovering from heart surgery, the little girl looked at her with wide, serious eyes. "Are you going to be the queen someday?" Emma asked, with the direct honesty that only children possess. Kate smiled gently, tucking a strand of hair behind Emma's ear. "Someday, yes. But right now, I'm just Kate, and I'm here to visit with you and see how you're doing." Emma considered this for a moment, then brightened. "When you're the queen, will you still visit hospitals?" "Absolutely," Kate replied without hesitation. "Taking care of people, especially children like you, will always be one of the most important parts of my job." These conversations with the hospital patients reminded Kate of why she had fallen in love with royal work in the first place. Beyond the ceremonies and constitutional duties, there was the genuine opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, to bring comfort and attention to causes that might otherwise be overlooked. During the drive back to London, Kate reflected on how the Queen had managed to balance the formal aspects of monarchy with genuine human connection. Every engagement, no matter how routine it might have seemed to outsiders, had been approached with real interest and care. The Queen had possessed an remarkable ability to make each person she met feel seen and valued, a skill that Kate was determined to develop and maintain. The first major challenge to their new dynamic came when they were asked to represent the crown at a state dinner for the President of France. This was the type of high-stakes diplomatic event that Kate had attended before, but never as the Princess of Wales and future Queen. The symbolism of her presence, the careful protocol that governed every interaction, and the intense media scrutiny, all combined to create pressure unlike anything she had previously experienced. Kate spent hours preparing with the palace's protocol experts, reviewing the guest list, studying briefing papers about current Anglo-French relations, and rehearsing the complex choreography of state entertaining. Her dress for the evening, a stunning blue gown that had been specially designed for the occasion, would be analyzed by fashion experts and diplomatic observers alike for its color choice, style, and jewelry pairings. The evening of the dinner, Kate stood before the mirror in her dressing room, adjusting the diamond tiara that had belonged to Queen Mary. The weight of the jewels on her head seemed symbolic of the increasing weight of responsibility she carried. William appeared behind her in the mirror, resplendent in his formal uniform, and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "You look absolutely magnificent," he said softly. "Grandmother would be so proud." The state dinner went smoothly, with Kate navigating the complex social dynamics of diplomatic entertaining with growing confidence. She found herself genuinely enjoying conversations with the French delegation about cultural exchanges, educational initiatives, and environmental cooperation. These weren't just polite social interactions. They were substantive discussions that could influence future policy and international relations. During a quiet moment between courses, the French president's wife complimented Kate on her French language skills and asked about her experiences adapting to royal life. The conversation, conducted in flawless French that Kate had been practicing for years, touched on the challenges of raising children in the public eye and the importance of maintaining family traditions while embracing change. The Queen spoke often about the importance of evolution within tradition, Kate replied thoughtfully. "I think our role is to honor the past while staying relevant to contemporary life." These words, spoken in what she thought was a private moment, would later be reported in the international press as an indication of her philosophy about modernizing the monarchy. Kate was still learning that as Princess of Wales, truly private moments were rare, and every comment could become a matter of public interest. The weeks that followed brought a steady stream of engagements that helped establish Kate's new public persona. She visited schools to discuss mental health initiatives, toured manufacturing facilities to learn about sustainable business practices, and attended cultural events that showcased British arts and creativity. Each engagement reinforced her growing understanding of how the monarchy could serve as a platform for highlighting important issues and supporting positive change. One particularly meaningful visit took her to a women's shelter in Birmingham, where she met with survivors of domestic violence and the staff members who supported them. The stories she heard were heartbreaking but also inspiring, filled with examples of courage, resilience, and hope that reminded her of the real-world impact her position could have. Sarah, a young mother who had escaped an abusive relationship, with her 2 children, spoke candidly about her journey towards safety and independence. "Having someone like you visit, someone who will be queen, it makes us feel like our stories matter," she told Kate. "It makes us feel less invisible." These words stayed with Kate long after the visit ended. The Queen had often spoken about the monarchy's role in giving voice to those who might otherwise go unheard, and Kate was beginning to understand the profound responsibility that came with that power. The evening after the shelter visit, Kate and William sat in their private sitting room while the children did homework at the kitchen table nearby. The normalcy of family life provided a crucial counterbalance to the intensity of public duties, and Kate treasured these moments of domestic peace. "How are you managing all of this?" William asked, looking up from the briefing papers he was reviewing for the next day's engagements. Kate set down her book and considered the question carefully. "Some days I feel completely overwhelmed," she admitted. "But then I think about the Queen and how she managed to serve for over 70 years while raising a family and maintaining her dignity through every crisis. If she could do that, surely I can learn to handle whatever comes next." William reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers as they had done countless times over the years. "We're learning together, and we have each other, just like she always said we would need." That night, as Kate prepared for bed, she stood once again before the mirror, this time wearing comfortable pajamas instead of formal evening wear. The Woman looking back at her appeared tired but determined, changed by recent events but still recognizably herself. The journey from university student to future queen had been gradual, but these past weeks had accelerated her transformation in ways she was still processing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more public appearances, and continued preparation for a role that would define the rest of her life. But tonight, she felt ready to face whatever came next, supported by her love for William and their children, guided by the Queen's example, and strengthened by her growing understanding of the service and sacrifice that true leadership required. 6 months had passed since the Queen's death, and Kate could feel how profoundly the experience had changed not just her public role, but her entire family's understanding of their place in the world. The grief had softened, but not disappeared, weaving itself into the fabric of their daily lives in ways both subtle and profound. What had emerged from this period of mourning was a stronger, more unified family with a clearer sense of purpose and direction. The spring morning was unusually warm for London, with cherry blossoms beginning to bloom in the palace gardens. Kate stood at the window of her office, watching gardeners tend to the flower beds that the Queen had personally designed years earlier. These gardens had been one of the Queen's great joys, and maintaining them felt like preserving a living piece of her legacy. Today marked a significant milestone in their journey forward, the announcement of Kate's first major solo initiative as Princess of Wales. After months of careful planning and consultation with experts, she was ready to launch a comprehensive program focused on early childhood development, combining her long-time passion for children's welfare with the platform and resources that her new position provided. The decision to focus on early childhood hadn't come lightly. Kate had spent countless hours meeting with researchers, educators, and child development specialists, learning about the critical importance of the first 5 years of life in shaping human potential. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that this was where she could make the most meaningful difference. "Mummy, what are you looking at?" Charlotte's voice interrupted her thoughts. The 7-year-old had wandered into the office, still in her school uniform, carrying a painting she had created during art class. Kate knelt down to examine her daughter's artwork, a vibrant scene showing their family standing together under a rainbow, with what appeared to be the Queen's spirit watching over them from a cloud above. The painting was remarkably similar to the one little Isla had given her in Scotland, and Kate marveled at how children seemed to process grief and hope in such pure, uncomplicated ways. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Kate said, hugging Charlotte close. "Tell me about the colors you chose." Charlotte pointed to different parts of the painting, explaining her artistic choices with the serious attention to detail that she brought to everything she cared about. These moments of normal family interaction had become even more precious to Kate as her public duties expanded. She was determined to maintain the balance between royal responsibility and maternal devotion that the Queen had somehow managed throughout her own children's upbringing. William appeared in the doorway, having returned from a meeting with the Prime Minister about upcoming Commonwealth initiatives. The past months had seen him step more fully into his role as heir to the throne, taking on additional responsibilities while supporting his father's adjustment to kingship. The experience had matured him in visible ways, adding gravitas to his natural warmth and approachability. "How did the final preparations go for tomorrow's announcement?" he asked, settling into the chair across from Kate's desk while Charlotte climbed onto his lap with her painting. "Everything's ready," Kate replied, though she could hear the nervousness in her own voice. "The research is solid, the partnerships are in place, and the team has done incredible work putting together the framework. I just hope it makes the kind of difference we're aiming for." Tomorrow's announcement would introduce her Future Foundations initiative, a comprehensive program designed to support parents, caregivers, and communities in providing the best possible start for children. The program would include parent education classes, community support networks, research initiatives, and advocacy for policy changes that prioritized early childhood development. The project represented months of work and consultation, but more than that, it embodied Kate's vision of how the monarchy could serve as a force for positive change in the 21st century. Rather than simply lending her name to existing charities, she was creating something new, using her platform to bring together experts, funding, and public attention around an issue that could genuinely transform lives. "Papa, look what I painted," Charlotte said, showing William her artwork. "It's our family, and great-grandmother is still taking care of us from heaven." William studied the painting with the serious attention that Charlotte's artistic efforts always deserved. "It's wonderful, Charlotte. I think great-grandmother would love to see how you've remembered her." These references to the Queen had become a natural part of their family conversations, helping the children process their loss, while keeping her memory alive in their daily lives. Kate was grateful that the children felt comfortable talking about their great-grandmother, sharing memories and asking questions that helped them understand death and continuity in age-appropriate ways. That evening, after the children had been tucked into bed with their usual stories and songs, Kate and William sat together in their sitting room, reviewing the materials for the next day's announcement one final time. The folder contained research studies, program outlines, partnership agreements, and media strategies that represented the most ambitious project Kate had undertaken since joining the royal family. "Are you nervous?" William asked, noticing her, reviewing the same page for the third time. "Terrified," Kate admitted with a laugh. "This feels different from anything I've done before. It's not just about supporting someone else's work or highlighting existing programs. This is something I'm creating, something that will bear my name and reflect my priorities. What if it doesn't work? What if I've overestimated what I can accomplish?" William set aside his own papers and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "Do you remember what grandmother told you about taking risks in royal work?" Kate smiled, recalling a conversation from several years earlier when she had expressed similar doubts about a mental health initiative she was developing. The Queen had listened patiently to her concerns, then offered advice that had stayed with her ever since. She said that the greatest risk was not taking any risks at all, Kate repeated. That the monarchy's relevance depended on our willingness to tackle difficult issues and try new approaches, even if we sometimes failed. "And she was right," William said, taking Kate's hand. "The work you're launching tomorrow has the potential to change countless lives, even if every aspect doesn't work perfectly, even if you have to adjust and adapt along the way, you're addressing something that really matters." The day of the announcement dawned bright and clear, with an energy that seemed to match Kate's nervous excitement. She had chosen to make the announcement at a community center in East London, surrounded by parents, children, and early childhood professionals who would be among the first beneficiaries of the new program. Standing before the assembled crowd, Kate felt the weight of her new role and the responsibility it carried. These weren't just polite observers attending a royal engagement. These were real people whose lives could be genuinely improved by the work she was undertaking. The thought was both humbling and energizing. "Early childhood is not just about the years before school," Kate began, her voice strong and clear despite her nerves. "It's about building the foundation for everything that comes after: educational success, emotional resilience, physical health, and social connection. When we invest in our youngest children, we're investing in the future of our entire society." The response from the audience was immediate and enthusiastic. Parents nodded in recognition of the challenges she described, while professionals expressed excitement about the resources and support the program would provide. Most importantly, Kate could see genuine hope in people's faces. Hope that this initiative might make a real difference in their lives and their children's futures. During the question and answer session that followed, a young mother named Priya stood up to share her story. She had struggled with postnatal depression after her son's birth, feeling isolated and overwhelmed despite her love for her child. The support she eventually received had transformed both their lives, but she wondered how many other mothers were still struggling in silence. "Programs like this could have reached me months earlier," Priya said, her voice emotional but strong. "They could have prevented so much pain and helped me be the mother my son deserved from the beginning." Kate felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to Priya's story. This was exactly why the work mattered, not for the headlines or the positive press coverage, but for the real people whose lives could be changed by having access to support, information, and community when they needed it most. The coverage of the announcement exceeded Kate's expectations, but more importantly, the response from professionals and organizations working in early childhood development was overwhelmingly positive. Offers of partnership and collaboration poured in from universities, healthcare systems, and community organizations across the country and around the Commonwealth. That evening, as Kate and William watched news coverage of the day's events with their children, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction that went beyond any public recognition. George, Charlotte, and Louis had watched their mother stand up and speak about something she cared deeply about, demonstrating that their roles as royals could be used to make positive changes in the world. "Mummy, will this help other children, like me?" Louis asked, not fully understanding the complexities of early childhood development, but grasping that his mother was trying to help people. "It will help all children, sweetheart," Kate replied, pulling him onto her lap. "It will help make sure that every child has the best possible start in life, just like we want for you and Charlotte and George." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Kate found herself thinking about the Queen and how proud she would have been of this day. The program embodied everything the Queen had taught her about royal service, using privilege and platform to address real problems, bringing people together around shared goals, and working patiently and persistently toward long-term change. Standing once again at her bedroom window, looking out at the lights of London twinkling in the darkness, Kate felt a profound sense of connection to the millions of families across the country and around the world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she felt confident that she was finding her own path within the role she had inherited. The grief for the Queen would always be part of her story, but so would this moment of stepping forward into her own legacy of service. In honoring the past while building toward the future, Kate had found not just her voice as Princess of Wales, but her purpose as a leader who could make a genuine difference in the world. The Queen's example had shown her the way, but the path ahead was uniquely her own to walk.